Dumela, Saubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Upshin, Dubra Otra, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenas noches, bonsoir. What's going on, folks? Good evening, and welcome to a very special episode of the Doriel Show. This is a very special episode because it is specifically targeted to scholars that I work with, young scholars who are going to see this in a few minutes. I thought I'd have a really brief introductory conversation with a new colleague of mine who decides to go back, way back, back into time, and take a look at who we are before we got where we are today. Please welcome to this episode of A New Class is in Session, and that is Brother Taaqiy Grant.
Hey, greetings. How are you, Doriel?
Greetings, greetings.
I love
I
your
am,
multilingual greetings you have there, all different languages from around the world. It's
oh,
quite interesting.
there's a reason for it. Yes, 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 because we are global. We are global people. So I want to
That is
try to
correct.
embody, and as I learn new languages and meet new people, I will continue to add this string of greetings. So, of course, hopefully you'll be able to help me with that.
Hey, I look forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. So, we're here for a very special conversation. I am an educator, as most people know, and I've had the opportunity to teach a few great young people about the story of people of African ancestry. Given the grade that I teach, I have recognized across the decades that the initial introduction of people of African ancestry is always framed from a position of subjugation, a position of servitude, a position that does not include power, does not include prosperity, does not include position of greatness. And I thought I would take a moment for, you know, a couple of questions to whet the appetite of the young scholars in order to have them think they must have come from somewhere, but where? And where can we find this information? So, to my scholars, Miss Larrier has taken some of the questions that you have asked and have put them together for this conversation. So, when we study um, the beginning of what we now know as the Americas, we only see, as you know, I say, the indigenous people who lived here before people came from Europe. And then somewhere along the line, there are these other people, we now recognize them as Africans, who sort of come along for the ride. But who were they before? Where can we get this information? And what were they doing before they got here? That's why I invited my Brother Taaqiy Grant, to the conversation.
Well, glad to be here. Something you said kind of struck me immediately was the notion, or the not the notion, but the understanding that when we learn um, this history being African history, from this standpoint in this system is from a point of subjugation. I always found that very interesting because that frames the outlook that young people have, people African of descent have upon themselves, and which kind of leads us to a state of hopelessness. Because if you don't see yourself as being great, then you don't aspire to be great. And I remember for myself, I kind of adored white culture because I didn't see, talking about in that 9-year old kind of period of time, fourth grade, when everyone that I admired looked other than myself. And seeing myself as great is something I didn't see because it was only, I didn't learn anything because it wasn't on TV, or damn sure didn't learn it in schools. Um, But until I was exposed in a great length to our culture, I began to realize how great we are and how great I am. Because now I saw the reflection of myself in that greatness. So it's very important, especially when you're dealing with children, for them to learn and know their history. I think it's understated how important it is, um, that this is taught on a regular basis, and it's not taught intentionally, because it hasn't been taught, we would not be in the state that we are now. So as Black people, we have to keep that in mind, that we have to educate our children, teach them about their history, because they're not going to learn it in this system. They're just not. I don't care how many conversations about inclusion we have with education, it's not going to take place on a scale that it needs to take place. You get some snippets here and there, but you're not going to get it in its, I don't even say raw state, but you're not going to get it to the point where it's really going to be that it's going to be uplifting enough to our people. So even if there is a curriculum in school, and I'm gonna go back to the 1990s and the infamous case with Dr. Jeffries and the I think it was the SUNY system, um, the curriculum of inclusion, the great fight that they had. That was something that we've been kind of going with for having this discussion with them for a very long time in terms of including our history in their textbooks. And they'll pacify us at points and give us little snippets of history, but not in the scale, again, in the framework in which we need it. So whatever that is taught in school, we have to make sure that we accompany that at home, and take our children on trips, particularly to museums, and if we can afford to take them abroad to places, let them see their history in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, South Africa. Let them see that. Let's see the greatness of their ancestors, and that's obviously what we should be aspiring to do. But if we can't get there, a lot of our history is hidden away in museums and libraries.
Excellent. Precisely. So, even though I guess I thought of this as a one-part conversation, I'll probably pass this on to the parents of my scholars. And so I would love to delve into this just a teeny bit more. And so because again, the first time that we learn about, let's say, the other people is actually, let's say, in third grade. So in third grade, the curriculum is that there is an African country, an Asian country, or let's say a group of African people. There we go. A group of Asian people, and then I believe it's a group of European people. So, and then different schools, districts, and what have you, they'll sort of narrow down, and then teachers can sort of choose one of the groups of these three particular groups and then focus on them. So, and that can be from, and I'm going to use I'll say a multicultural potluck perspective. Some people know what I mean. We're going to pass by that. So in fourth grade, again, they enter and we focus on the history of, now I'm from New York, because this is going to be shown around the world. I'm from New York. So we talk about states history and then the development of the state from a geographical perspective and then a people's perspective. So I always tell my young people that the people who were here before newcomers came from Europe are indigenous people. And then we talk about the different type of groups that exist in the New York area. Okay. So then we just jump to the people who have come in order to, quote unquote, make the land better and make the people better and develop what we know as these United States. And then somehow, some way, there's this little insert of like, poof, they just arrived. African people just arrived. And so I was always like, wow, I wonder what the perspective is. And so as I speak to my students, and Miss Larry speaks to you like this, young people, because again, you're going to be watching this in a little bit. They're not phased. They're just like, okay, they were not, and then they were. They just appeared. So at one point I asked, I said, well, where do you think they came from? They didn't have a frame of reference. What do you think they were doing before they got here? They have no frame of reference. So I wanted to sort of take a step back because there's a huge gap of we talk about um, the people of, let's say, Egypt, but then there is no middle ground before they get here. So that's why I wanted to ask you. So let's just say if I did go, want to take my students to a museum, what could they find? What would they find? What should they be looking for?
So they want to see first and foremost is people who look like themselves. Now, when we speak of the greatness of Africans, the middle part, we have to think of the emergence of great West African civilizations after the decline of Kemet and Kush and Aksum in East Africa. There seemed to be a shift westwardly to great kingdoms like the Songhai, Benin, Mali, Timbuktu. All these great kingdoms begin to emerge prior to the development of Western or that vis-a-vis European civilization. So you had these great African kingdoms. You had the Great Walls of Benin, which is larger than the Great Walls of China. You had these great African empires that were expansive over several what they would call countries today, but basically over vast territories. And certainly they were technologically advanced as well. And one of the things we talk about was the ability to smelt iron and things like that. So you had these great works that you would see artistically as an expression of the advancement in the craftsmanship Africans possessed during this time. We talk about this in the advancement of math and sciences. We know these things existed in East Africa with the advent of the pyramids and temples and things like that, but you also see them in West Africa as well. We talk about Northwest Africa and the Moors or the Black Arabs that existed in that region who conquered Spain and ruled Spain for over several hundred years. This is how it's known that Europe came out of the Dark Ages by the technological advancements of information that the Moors left behind. And it's said that the Pope got the Jews to translate the Arabic into Hebrew, and from there they were able to learn this information on navigation and astrology, astronomy, and all these various different things that Africans already had information on. So we lead to up to the next point of history, which talks about the point at which these Africans came to the West unwillingly, because there were Africans here, because Africans always had the information how to go back and forth the Atlantic. But when the Africans that came unwillingly, this information was gathered from those Africans who knew how to travel. And thus Europeans found the West, because at one point, remember, they thought the world was flat. So, and this is not something we're making up. This is something they were they're very confident in telling you that the world was flat. They were in the Dark Ages. They had no information, but it was from the Africans in Northwest Africa that they came out of the Dark Ages. So I find that, I always find that quite interesting. Even the number system we use today, the way we write numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, those are what they're considered called ancient Arabic numbers. So there were so many things that were taking from that African conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and the text, even like the city of Madrid in Spain, is an Arabic word for the city of learning. And it goes to show you that the Moors, even the influence of these Africans that lived there, is still seen today.
Okay, so why don't we have that? Why don't we have this in our textbooks? And this is it's not really a question that I'm expecting you to answer, but why more? Let's go to the easier question. Where can we get some of this information? Where can we get some? So actually I wanna frame that right there is an excellent example of how you are committed to this work. Do you see what I'm pointing to?
The what they call a karas, the sarcophagus.
Yeah, yes, your sarcophagus.
Yes.
Where did you get that from?
and so that's actually a perfect tie-in, because it goes back to what we were saying in terms of the supporting or supplement information, a supplement education that you have to have from home in order to help your development as a young Black child in America. You're not going to get it in the education system. And what little you do get about who you are, as parents, we have to be prepared to supplement that. I was blessed enough to be in a home and an environment that understood who we are as people. That was actually a gift from my mother. So it was always something that was, that was there, in terms of we're Black and this is who we are. And, just the pride aspect was there, not just the pride aspect, that was definitely there. And books and literature and other things, posters, all these other things they were around me as well.
Okay. Now, some families might be able to take students to the museum. Some families may have the access to, get your own sarcophagus to, have in your home. But if not, we have books, we have the internet, we have videos that are available to us. So I thought, and maybe you have a suggestion as well, of maybe a book that you've read or something that you've come across or a movie that you've seen. And because you and I are older, we can also sort of sift between the things that some people want us to believe and then the actual truth.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So there are some videos or some movies or some pieces of literature, let us say, or content. I'm saying that because some of my students use that word like we use it. Some content that is actually written by people who want us to only think one way, which is kind of keeping us in this state of being that is not necessarily so wholesome and upright. So I pulled out some books that I have. And everyone has access to a library, everyone has access to the internet. And so if you do not have these texts in your classroom, if your teacher is not familiar with them, because once my students leave me, they go to someone else, then you can actually, and I've already put some of the titles into the chat and more will be added. You can look them up yourself. You can look up the video and the text. You can access the text. You can purchase the text. You can purchase the text. All these texts that I have that I'm going to show you right now come from my own personal library. And this is just what I was able to pull off the shelf within the past 4 minutes. So I will start with, I'll start with this text. It is called African History for Beginners. The author is Herb Boyd. African History for Beginners, Herb Boyd. This is literally about 30 years old. I really, really like this because if it is a quick read that you're looking for, there's more pictures in it than you would think. So I'm just going to sort of do a flip. So I love the images that are lots of photographs, and then there's text around it. And these are photographs of people, places, and artifacts that are seen and experienced. Then we have, now this is a worn text, I will say, because this is actually one of the first texts that I probably purchased for my own children, and it is called Lessons from History a Celebration in Blackness. This is the elementary edition. There is I think a middle or a high school edition. This is by one of my favorite authors, Jawanza Kunjufu. This text looks really beat up because I've had it for a very long time. So even look, I'm just going to show you the back. It's really, because it's just been through a lot. It is more text, but there are also images of people and also drawings of people. And I actually really like this text because at the end of each chapter, there are sort of like review questions. So actually a teacher can use it as short snippets on African and then African American history. We have an older text, which is called African People in World History. This is by one of our scholars that Brother Taaqiy and I know quite deeply or quite intimately because we studied his work, John Henrik Clarke. And actually, I've listened to this man lecture at a number of lecture halls. Then we're going to go back, and I mean way, way back. So your parents, you're probably not even your parents have these, but your grandparents, and I'm speaking to my current scholars, your grandparents probably have these texts. These are actually comic books, and they're called, it's the Golden Legacy series. The Golden Legacy series. This happens just to be the first one I pulled off the shelf, but this is about the life of Robert Smalls. But the Golden Legacy series was it was like our comic book. It was and it still exists. It's our comic book, but they are extremely, extremely old. And so, but it's totally written in the comic book format. Let's say, I guess, DC or Marvel. There's a lot of action. There's little text bubbles and thought bubbles, but it's all written within the framework of telling the story about the people, the place, and the problems that occurred in a person's life. And each episode is focused on one character or one situation. Now, as we get a little older, but because I have students that really like to do some deep research, this is a classic that is and should be in every real, I'll say real teacher's classroom, especially if you're going to be teaching on African history, Black history, even if you're an elementary school teacher, but middle, high school, and especially as you're an adult. And that is the African presence in ancient America. They came before Columbus by just one of the, we'll say, the godfathers of this work, and that is Ivan van Sertima. So yes, they came before Columbus. And if you see that, I'm trying to point, if you see that face, this is one of the Olmec, right? Help me with this, Brother Taaqiy. This is one of the Olmec heads that exist in,
you can say, Central and South America.
Central and South America. Thank you, Central and South America. And how it is, there's no mistake. There is no mistake that there are beautiful, beautiful parallels and remnants and similarities, if you will, to people of African ancestry. And last but not least, this is my most recent acquisition. It is called Sacred Nile. And this is, I got to stand up for this one. So this is by Chester Higgins. There we go. Chester Higgins, who I literally just met about a year ago. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful, all of my scholars, you will see this book. Beautiful photographs. Let me just turn to something that's really photographs of, I want to say people and places, but let me get up real close to that. So these are examples, and Brother Taaqiy has been to a number of these places because he takes trips to Kemet, which some people now call Egypt. And so there are photographs of over 30 years of his work, of celebrations and pyramids and just gorgeous illustrations. So we have Sacred Nile as well. You will see this in the comments. Brother Taaqiy, so why don't you tell us about a place that you go to on a regular basis and how people can sort of find out the truth?
Just before I do that, just give me one quick second.
Oh, okay. All right. So while he's doing that, I think he's going to go get some information himself. So while we're waiting, if anybody has any comments, and even if you are seeing this on the replay, please drop the comments in the chat box. Whether you're on YouTube, I presume people will drop comments on YouTube that we can actually sort of come back to this conversation and add to the conversation. So if anybody has any books on African history or Black history, about who people are prior to coming to this land that we call the United States, then you could also add that to the comments as well.
So oh wow, there's so much I actually want to add to this. So in the age of technology, as you said, there's so many sources of information. And our show, Happy Talks, we had the pleasure of having Chester Higgins on the program several times.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who are interested, they can go to the YouTube channel, Happy Film, and
I'll type that in the comments.
They can see that particular interview with Chester Higgins actually talking about his book and the work that came around it. But what I want to add to that as well is, before we get into other forms of media, because we were on books, is this book here, being that we're actually in the framework of kind of education textbook kind of formats. This is a book published or written by Malefe Asante and others. I know Dr. Rosin Jeffries is a part of it. You could actually even see the
Uh,
uh,
it,
it's
it is a textbook.
a
Look
text,
at that.
and it's a complete history of. It's called African American History: A Journey of Liberation,
I love
and it starts, in the beginning, in the sense of our timeline, and it goes all the way through to present day. It's a complete text. It has images here from within Nubia. This is an image of Queen T right here. So it's very thorough in the context of just African history.
I'm gonna have to
And
find
this is
that
something,
myself,
yeah,
brother
this is
Taki.
something that, a book I highly recommend people get, especially for the education of Black children.
I'm gonna try to find that. Wait, just show it to me one more time. African American History: A Journey of Liberation. Okay, keep talking. I'm gonna go
Okay.
find it.
Okay. And, when it comes to education, we have to make sure that we are not just um, have the text format, but we're also stimulating people with images. And this is where the film comes in. And as a documentarian, I strongly recommend people watch films that are dedicated to the education upliftment of who they are. And this film right here, Happy, um, deals essentially with that type of information in regards to who we are as a people and understanding our role in this world.
Excellent. And so while I'm doing that, if I'm not sure if you can see the chat and drop in the comments either on YouTube, preferably, if you drop in the link should I just put happyfilm.com?
Yes. Happyfilm.com. Yes.
Okay, I'll add that right now. So I'll say video happyfilm.com. Beautiful. Okay, good, good. So I do hope, and there are people who are watching this, which is excellent. So I do hope that people can add to the resource file of
Source file. I like
right,
that. The
the
resource file.
resource. Precisely. We always come on. We're educators. We always have to have a resource file. And now that we are digitized, right? Because we know that the revolution will not be
Televised.
come through. I had to say that.
Oh man, I know he would love to hear that right now. Brother Dr. Ken Harris.
Let's just drop this in for
But
him.
no, there's so much information out there right now. In fact, people say we are in the age of information. So we are not in a shortcoming for information. Just unfortunately, some of the information is not good or it's not tailored towards certain demographics. Like I said, that book there, the greats of our community, the Dr. Malefe Asante, Dr. Rosin Jeffries. I'm not sure the others that worked on it, but when they put that book together, it was framed for young minds. Even in terms of its visual perspective, in the way in the language, in the vernacular used in the book is something that's geared towards young people. So we also got to keep that in mind in terms of who we're trying to reach. We wanted to make it as plain so a child can understand, and they did a great job there. So when we're looking for information, I know there are a lot of children's books that are very good, that kind of help children on an introductory level kind of just start to format and develop a sense of themselves. So I think one of the things we need to look for is those types of things, and there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of great work in regards to just opening young minds, and we got to keep that going. And as those young minds get opened, and they get more hungry for information, and that's when they start to seek out some of the other great works. They came for Columbus, and books like that, and really start to want to develop. And as their minds expand, now they want to see these things for themselves. So now they begin to want to travel, and they want to go to museums, and now they really want to really expand their scope and understanding for this universe that they live in. So it's a beautiful thing, and the information's here. We've been blessed that we've had so many great scholars that come before us who've left this legacy. If you go back to ancient Egypt, the Egyptians they were like the well, I like to say the Africans that lived along the Nile, they were the first historians. They were avid studiers and readers, and they had a love and passion for history. We see ourselves as just having a love and passion for histories. We don't see ancient people having a love and passion for history. But we think in terms of ancient Egypt, it was the most longing, standing civilization, expanded. Some people say over 3,000 years. There's no civilization in the world that lasted that long. So there's a phrase that goes, or saying that goes, even to the ancients, Egypt was already ancient to them. You know what I mean? So we think in the context of time, King Tut, who we're all very familiar with, was approximately 1,000 years after the pyramids were built. That's phenomenal when we think in terms of that context of time. So, when you look at their walls of history that they had, what they call like the Hall of the Ancestors, and all these different texts that they had, sometime expanded over 2,000 years, just in terms of documenting records. So it's phenomenal just to think of just how important knowing the history was important to our ancestors. You know what I mean? And how they had that, how can I say this? They utilized that to empower themselves. This is why the art was so important. And they had these, what you would call today, statues all around. And it was something that was awe-inspiring for young people to see themselves in the form of greatness. You think of like a Thutmose, who was a great warrior, but he had someone like a Menchu Hotep to aspire to be after, to inspire himself after, and he built his tomb next to his, but you got to understand, he was 500 years after him. So he had to see him as this great hero, this great figure, this great liberator. So he's like, damn, this is the person I want to be like, and the Ramses that come after them. So they saw themselves as greatness because they were learning their history. So we need to take a page out of that book. Talking about books, let's take a page out of that book and figure out how do we inspire our children to want to be great like the greats.
And that is one example is by walking the walk, by talking the talk, by visiting the places. And so allow me to start to, I guess, summarize just what we've done. And by saying, get your coins together, save up the holiday money and the birthday money. And if someone says, oh, where would you like to go on a trip? Take a trip back to Kemet. Take a trip to, as you will hear people say, the motherland where it all began. That did not intend to rhyme like that. It just came out like that. But
That's
when
the
they
New
say
Yorker in you.
that's no, let's be clear. That's the Brooklynite in me.
And I'm gonna tell you, man, that to me, that's the problem with New York. I tell you, man, it's Brooklyn. It's because
It's not about
when Brooklyn was passed the torch, Brooklyn always, it's Brooklyn first.
that's right.
Brooklyn is never, New York first. Brooklyn is always Brooklyn first.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, it's all right. But yeah, I'll say this. So yes, get the coins together, and we're going to Kemet in February 16th to the 25th. And it's a very important trip and journey. I hate to call it a trip because it doesn't really give it the value that it deserves. I consider it more like a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
It's important for Black people to make this pilgrimage and to see themselves as great. And one of the things, I've been doing it for over 25 years, taking people back and forth to the Nile. And one of the most remarkable things I would hear, and I've heard it several times over the course of over 2 decades, is I now have to rethink my life and rethink what I've been taught. And this is coming from adults. This is not coming from children. Because Kim has a way of changing your perspective on history, on what you've been taught in school. You now have to, and what you may have been taught in religious institutions, church, mosque, things like that. When you go to Kemet, now your frame, your references now look different, in terms of architecture, science, math, religion, spirituality. All those things now change, and you orient yourself back to who you are. And that's why they try to keep it away from us so much. And that's why it's important for us to go visit these places, to see it, because our ancestors were very deliberate on the legacy they left behind, and they wanted us to see it. Because the same fight we're having today, they had then, in terms of the attempt to erase history.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Mm-hmm.
understood that. So they began to carve the images differently, because they was like, there are people that's coming that's going to try to erase this history. They're going to try to become, they're going to try to adorn our attire, use our language, and become what I like to call Egyptized. Egypt was one of the only places where the invaders didn't come imposing their will and trying to bring their way of life. The invaders of ancient Egypt more so adopted the beliefs and the customs of the Africans, which is amazing when you think about that. That didn't happen any place else. Most invading armies come trying to push their will on you. These folks were coming in trying to sit at your feet.
Like Alexander the Great.
Right.
That's a whole other lesson.
Right. But so when you have that, and you have this new population of people that's coming into a land and invading and taking over, and now starting to emulate you after several hundred years, it may become confusing to folks. Some people, even themselves, they may believe that they were the ones who were actually the originators of this civilization. A lot of that information is found here in Destruction of Black Civilization
Right.
by
I
Chancellor
couldn't pull out
Williams.
mine quick enough. But yes, it's such,
So
we're gonna have
yeah,
a book show in here, folks.
yeah. So Chancellor Williams talks about Egypt turning from black to brown, and the amalgamation of races and so forth. But it's really interesting, because when you start to understand the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Romans, all these the Babylonians, all these different Arabs, all these different invaders that come here, they all come with this idea, with this notion in mind, wanting to learn. And now you go see certain temples there. Certain temples were constructed by Greco-Romans in that period, and you look at the features, they look different now. They don't look like the other ones. You know what I'm saying?
I want to, some people would say, I want to put a pin in that. And so what Brother Taaqiy just said, or sort of ran through, were European groups who you will learn a whole lot about. You will learn these names again, Greeks, Romans, Babylonians, even Palestinians, and you'll hear about it from dress, from food, from music, from art, architecture, philosophy. So you're going to hear Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. You're going to hear these names over and over and over. What we want to do, and it is my prayer, and I'm turning to you and looking at you, it is my prayer that we can actually come back and have like another episode of a new classes in session, and maybe talk about a few of these very sort of finite individuals who have expansive stories. But then who did they learn it from? What do we learn? How do we learn it? All from food, language. And so we know we have another brother who can participate in this conversation, Brother Asar Imhotep. And so I'm going to pull him into this as well, just so we can continue to teach the children well. What do you think, Brother Taaqiy?
Listen, let me know where I can help. That's what
I
we're here to do.
appreciate it. So for those who are watching, this has just been an introduction to, maybe we'll just call it before 1619. I have no idea. This is just like a little pop of an idea that occurred over the past, couple of hours. And so, but it definitely was a follow-up to Brother Taaqiy came to a career day. I invited him, and we were only able to have a little tidbit, a little sip of tea, if you will. And so we wanted to have a longer conversation. But we do invite you back, and we'll try to figure out how to do that in very small segments so that they are digestible, that people can learn. Because Brother Taaqiy and I sat in front of some of the great people that we have mentioned tonight: Chancellor Williams, Dr. John Henrik Clark, Amos Wilson, Ivy Van Sertima, etc., for hours at a time. We know you do not have the bandwidth to sit that long, but we do want to teach you something and have you walk away with something that you can actually act upon, incorporate into your daily living and thinking, and then shift your paradigm, change your narrative, and live in such a way that you can actually live the way our ancestors intended for you to live. So, peace and blessings. As I say on my show, this is a Learn to Grow You moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. Brother Taaqiy, do you want to say good night in your own special way?
Yes, yes, definitely. Just want to say thank you for having me on the show again, and we look forward to develop these the series of small classes in session conversations. For those who are up now listening to us, I encourage them to come with us. IKidDoors.com. I don't know if you can put that link in there,
I sure will right
because they
now.
will not only have the opportunity to see these empowering or inspiring images, but they also have the opportunity to learn that we were the first people to develop a system of what we call it today economics. And those Africans were masters at that, so much in so much that they created Kemet, as we call that's called, as most notably called, and from that, the world's great first mega economy was formulated. So we encourage people to come with us. It's going to be a dynamic experience, and we're looking forward to it.
There we go. I was just trying to get all the links together for you, for us.
Okay.
Okay, beautiful. So I did put it in twice, and the second time that I put it in is the actual hyperlink, so you can utilize that. So once again, peace and blessings. Yes, this was a late night chat. My students will see part of this in a few hours when I go see them, and it will definitely be sent out to other people. So once again, peace and blessings. It's a Learn to Grow You moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. My name is Doriel Inez Larrier, and this is Brother Taaqiy Grant of Akhet Tours and Happy Film, HAPIFILM.com. I'm going to put that in again. Happyfilm.com. Nope, Billy. Why is it? It's late at night. There we go. And we'll see you on the next go round. Peace and blessings.
Peace.